On April 5th, voters in Pennsylvania's 116th state legislative district will have the opportunity to vote in a special election. The election will determine who will fill out the remainder of the term held by former state representative Tara Toohill, who is now a Luzerne County judge. Toohill's term ends on November 30th. Our Lisa Sugar talked with Charles McElwee, an SSPTV political analyst and the editor of Rio Clear's Pennsylvania media program, and he says the election has huge implications in what will be a major midterm election year.
The midterm cycle is going to be a battle, especially in Pennsylvania. This is a battleground for both parties, considering its distinction as a swing state, especially in recent years. And at this present moment, it does appear to be a year where Republicans undoubtedly have the advantage. And the question will be, how will that translate at the congressional level in terms of the map? But in addition to that, how does it translate at the legislative level? Because we're going to have these redrawn legislative districts in the coming months or weeks. And the 116th legislative district will certainly be a battle, as it has been for many years. This has historically figured largely in Pennsylvania politics. Think back to even 1981. I mean, Coriel Stevens held this seat from 81 to 88. Then he subsequently went on to the state Superior Court and then was appointed by former Governor Tom Corbett to serve on the Supreme Court. And then what's interesting about this year, it does make you think of 1994, for example. Tom Stish represented the district then, and less than a week after winning re-election in 94, switched parties from Democrat to Republican and then changed control of that chamber, resulting in Republicans holding the General Assembly plus the governor's office for the first time in Pennsylvania since 1981. And then after that, Todd Eaches, who then became majority leader of the Pennsylvania House as a Democrat, who then went on to lose to Tara Toohill in 2010, and yet what was another Republican wave year. So a lot has gone on locally in Greater Hazleton when it comes to state house politics. So it will be interesting to see what happens in the coming months between a special election and then another election for the redrawn district, however that may look.
And when we talk about a special election, it's not the normal way that candidates can get on the ballot. These candidates will be chosen by the Republican and Democratic parties, correct?
It's a very complicated process. I mean, even people on the inside, people whose livelihoods revolve around electoral politics, will concede that the process is confusing. So what we're looking at is a special election on April 5th, and the major parties, so the Republicans and Democrats in Luzerne County, the state or the county committees will select their candidates to run for the existing 116th legislative district. So whoever prevails on April 5th will serve the remainder of Tara Toohill's term, which expires November 30th, 2022. Whoever prevails will serve the remainder of her present term. Separately, we'll have an election in November that will involve the redrawn district. The jam that everyone's in right now statewide is we don't know what those finalized lines look like because it's a major battle, lots at stake. Now, the present issue, the most immediate problem is we have this primary in May. And from congressional lines to legislative lines, we don't know what the final lines look like because we have a Democrat governor in Wolf and we have a Republican legislature. So a lot's at stake for both parties. And ultimately, the Democratic majority state Supreme Court, which has had a Democrat majority since 2015, will likely determine all the lines, which is exactly what they did in 2018 when they threw out the congressional district lines drawn in 2011, and there was a new map for the 2018 midterms. Incredibly confusing, and so far, among people who have publicly expressed interest of running for the special election on April 5th, Robert Schnee, Luzerne County councilman from Sugarloaf Township, wants to run as a Republican. He's interesting because he was a Democrat. He switched parties last year. Part of that realignment we're seeing locally, former Democrats who are now loyal Republicans. But the irony is, of course, in 1994, a Republican wave year, by historic margins, Tom Stish becomes a Republican and he was punished. He was considered a traitor. Well, they were appalled by what he did and punished him. And that's how he just won in 96. But the irony is, fast forward, close to 30 years, a lot of Democrats from that era are now Republican. And if anything, a move like Stish made in 94 would be celebrated in Hazleton today. And that's why somebody like Schnee, who was a Democrat, it's to his advantage to run as a Republican. So it just shows you how much has changed just locally in the past 30 years.
Today's news feature is brought to you by Lehigh Valley Hospital, Hazleton. Remember, in an emergency, our emergency room is the safest place to be.